Have you noticed that people are getting way more angry out there about like everything? No, they're getting more than just angry. They're getting absolutely awful. If I had not seen the video of this, I would not have believed it. And the video doesn't even... Hey!
Hey! Hey! Hey!
Yo!
Chill out! I'm behind you.
Yo, he is savage, yo!
Ladies and gentlemen.
Do you see what they're doing? They had to duct tape that guy. Now let me tell you, Stephen was so eager to show you the video, he jumped the gun a little bit. But let me tell you what happened before. The video doesn't show the two female flight attendants he groped, all right? Nor can I show you the part where he communicated with them in language that is not suitable for work or church, okay? By the way, he also in that language said his family was worth millions of dollars, which I don't understand because he was on a Frontier flight. Go figure. But just saying. So, as you saw, when he actually attacked one of the flight attendants, they actually had to duct tape him to the seat. So if you're ever on a plane with a guy named Maxwell Berry, you might want to change planes. Or just tell him, get the duct tape ready for that guy. By the way, where was he going? Any ideas? Huh? Florida. Going to Florida. Miami. It's like the whole country tilts southeast and everything loose falls into Florida. But, you know, behind that anger, that awfulness, it lies something deeper. People are becoming unhappier than ever about everything. Right now, 2/3 of the country feels we are on the wrong track. And that makes sense. I mean, you got high inflation, you've got war in Ukraine, you got political divisions, and of course, COVID. You can't forget COVID, it's still out there. But the problem goes deeper than unhappiness. This problem, again, way before COVID, people have been losing hope for years. COVID just made it worse. How much worse? Penn State does an annual Mood of the Nation survey, and it showed at the end of last year that 84% of Americans are either extremely or very worried about the future. And 26%, over 1 out of 4, say they have nothing that makes them hopeful. Nothing. I'm going to brunch afterwards. I'm hopeful for that. I mean, come on now. Nothing. And that loss of hope is killing people. See, for over 20 years, the suicide rate has been going up and up, and that together now with drug overdoses has led for the first time in over a century for our life expectancy to go down instead of up. And that was happening well before COVID. People are dying too soon. And they are dying from a loss of hope. They even call them that. They call them deaths of despair. You see, if you have hope, you live longer. You take better care of yourself. You don't do as many risky things. You don't drink too much or use drugs. But the more you lose hope, the less you take care of yourself. The more you risk. The more you drink and use drugs, and the more you die. And during the pandemic, deaths of despair went up higher than ever. Beyond COVID, hundreds of thousands died last year from overdoses, alcoholism, suicide. More died from deaths of despair than ever. Now, even if you are not at risk of a death of despair, that you might thinking, well, I wasn't until you told me that. Now I'm like depressed. It's Easter. Come on now. But do you see why people are struggling even to hold on to life? Do you at times struggle to kind of be hopeful, to hold on to hope? But how do you do more than just hold on to hope? How do you live in hope? How do you live in peace? How do you live even in joy, even on your worst days? How does that happen? In these words, God shows you the way. So let's listen and hear what God has to say. You can read it in the bulletin with me. You can follow along from Romans 8. And the people to whom Paul was writing were going through some very, very hard times. Hear the word of the Lord. I consider that the suffering of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to God's purpose. For those whom God foreknew, God also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he, Jesus, might be the firstborn within a large family. And those whom God predestined, God also called. And those whom God called, God also made righteous. And those whom God made righteous, God also glorified. What then are we to say about these things? If God is for us, who is against us? God, who did not withhold his own Son, but gave him up for all of us, will he not with them also give us everything else? Who will bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who vindicates. Who is to condemn? It is Christ Jesus, who died, yes, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed intercedes for us. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As is written, for your sake we are being killed. We are regarded as sheep. We are being killed all the day long. Sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things, we more than conquer through the one who has loved us. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So how do you live in hope? Live in peace. Live in joy every day, even on your worst days. How do you live with that level of confidence, that peace? Here God tells you. You do it by embracing the dawn. by embracing that dawn even in your darkest moments. But before you can embrace the real dawn, you got to let go of the false ones. Before you can embrace the real hope, you got to let go of the false ones. Now, what do I mean by false dawns, false hopes? Well, think about it. Why, in the wealthiest nation in the history of humanity, that's us, are people losing hope? Why are they succumbing to deaths of despair now? They're doing it because they have bought into hopes that are not real at all. Two economists, Angus Deaton and N. Case, they first coined this phrase, deaths of despair, and they did so because they could not find any other way to describe what they were seeing. Why were suicides shooting up? Why were overdoses increasing like never before? What was going on? Now, being economists, they did see some economic reasons. Wages were not going up. The lower education you had, the more likely you were to die of despair. But that did not explain it all by a long shot. You see, up until a few years ago, the vast majority of those dying of despair were white, not black or Hispanic. And yet these minority groups were facing similar hardships as the white folks were, and worse, discrimination, racism. But their suicide rates were not going up. So Case and Deaton discovered the problem went deeper. They realized it was a spiritual problem. By the way, these aren't like some Christian university. Angus Deaton won the Nobel Prize in economics. They both teach at Princeton. That was the data. Folks, they concluded dying of despair had bought into hopes that were not real at all. And when their hopes failed them, they lost hope altogether. Now, what were their false hopes? They had come to believe that what mattered was what stuff they could buy, what jobs they could hold, how close they came to the American dream. And yet the more they tried to get that dream, the further away it seemed to be. So they lost hope. But in the pursuit of that dream, they did lose touch with what did matter. Their connection to God, their connection to each other, to community. They lost touch with where real hope could be found. But the minority groups had connection to that still. When financial setbacks hit, jobs got lost, they had a hope that went deeper, that did not disappear, that did not lead to a fall into despair. But now that is changing. The virus of despair is starting to infect everyone. More and more, whatever the background, people are losing hope. Suicide rates and drug use are rising. And the younger you go, the worse it gets. So what are the false hopes that are failing? It's the same sort of delusion. Delusion that somehow something you measure will give you what you need. Now, people measure different stuff. Maybe it's popularity or likes on their favorite social media, or how many followers they have, or attractiveness, or their bank accounts, or their success, or their family's success, or even some religious achievement. But no matter how much you work for whatever you measure, it fails. And now, it doesn't fail because it's not good. Often it's good. It just does not go deep enough to what you really yearn for, to what you truly need. I mean, have you ever worked for something, hoped for something, something you bought, or a new job you wanted, or a new level of popularity, or a new relationship, or whatever, and then you got it, and yet it never completely became what you yearned for it to be, what you hoped it would be? Maybe at first, but it faded. It did not last. It didn't go deep enough. You longed still for something more. To paraphrase C.S. Lewis, that where you thought the beauty, the hope was located, it betrayed you. It was not there. But something was there, something that came through that thing. What came through was a longing, not the thing itself, more like the scent of a flower you have not found, like the echo of a tune you haven't yet heard, news from a country you have not yet visited. A longing. And what were you longing for? You were longing for what cannot be measured ever. You were longing for the measureless. And when you lose hope that the measureless even exist, despair will not be far away. That despair is what led little Avi Singer to stop doing his homework. Years ago, the filmmaker Woody Allen made a film called Annie Hall. And the character in that film, Alvy Singer, as a little boy, discovered something very distressing. So distressing it led him to give up hope. You may see it.
He's been depressed. All of a sudden, he can't do anything.
Why are you depressed, Alvy?
Tell Dr. Flicker. It's something he read.
Something you read, huh?
The universe is expanding.
The universe is expanding?
Well, the universe is everything, and if it's expanding, someday it will break apart, and that will be the end of everything.
What is that your business? He stopped doing his homework.
What's the point?
What has the universe got to do with it? You're here in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is not expanding.
It won't be expanding for billions of years yet, Alvy. And we've got to try and enjoy ourselves while we're here, huh?
I love that. You're here in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is not expanding. But you see what Alvy Singer discovered? The measureless does not exist. Everything, even the universe, ends. Nothing is forever. Nothing good ever lasts. But what if the good does last? What if it lasts forever? This past week I did a burial service for a family, and I noticed that the woman was being buried next to someone I knew, a guy named Ed Krzyzak. His wife, Linda, often attends worship here. And below Ed's name was this phrase, "Life is not forever, but love is." Now, if that's true, then you can have hope. Hope that never ends, that cannot ever be measured. And that's a hope you find in the words we read today. These people Paul was writing to were going through awful things, incredible suffering, but they carried a hope that went beyond anything they could ever measure. When that hope came true, they knew it would make everything they suffered no more significant than a night in a bad hotel. Whatever the hardships the world suffered, creation itself, they were suffering but labor pains. They were not the end of anything. They were the pains of a new world being born. But how can you know that hope is real? That it's not a false one like all the rest? Now you could think that. Most everyone in the ancient world had some hope of an afterlife. And pagan thought if you lived a virtuous life, you went to the blessed lands where life was easy. Or you got to leave your grubby body behind and become a disembodied spirit. Now, of course, the hope could not be verified as you were dead, but it was nice to think it could be true. Now, Jews came up with a similar hope, but different. They called it the resurrection of the righteous. So when you died, you first went up to some sort of divine waiting room. Pleasant, but not the end. You waited there until the end of everything. Then at that point, the resurrection came. And not only your resurrection, but the resurrection of everything. In a world where so much had gone wrong, in the end, God made everything right the way it was supposed to be. And in this new heavens and new earth, you got a new body, one that never decayed, one more wondrous than you could ever imagine. And Christians had pretty much the same hope with one radical change. Oh, by the way, if you think you just die and go to heaven and that's it, you're a lot closer to Plato's idea than Jesus's. Just saying. Now, what was the Christians' radical change? How did their hope shift? For them, resurrection was not just somewhere in the sweet by and by. Resurrection had already happened. It was not in the future, it was here now. Now, it's not here for everybody yet. They knew that. They said, we're still hoping for it. We haven't seen it for us yet, but we have seen it. We have seen it. Hundreds of people have witnessed it. We don't have to hope resurrection exists. We know resurrection exists. It happened to Jesus. And if it happened to Jesus, it's going to happen to us. It's going to happen to everything, to all creation. That's what Paul means by saying Jesus is the firstborn in a large family. If Jesus got born like that, you will get reborn like that. All creation will get reborn like that. And if you know that, if you know God's love takes death and turns it into resurrection, that God's love takes the cross and turns a weapon of condemnation into the way of salvation, then you know nothing exists that God will not turn for good. Nothing exists that separates you from God's love for you. Your failures do not do it. When Jesus died, God made you righteous forever. On your worst day, that does not change. That hope does not change. Nothing out there takes the love away either. No power, no height, nor depth. Nothing takes that love away ever. Not even death. Why? Jesus rose. And if Jesus rose, you are going to rise. Everything is going to rise. Resurrection has already come. It happened. And if it came once, it's going to come again, because that's what time it is. Let me explain. The Greeks had different words for time. And one word, chronos time, is like the time on my little Fitbit here. Time you can measure. By the way, I got over 10,000 steps already. I just want you to know. Thank you. You can applaud. No. But you know, that won't get me into heaven, just so you know. Won't get me resurrected. But then you have Kairos time. And Kairos time, you don't measure. Kairos time, you feel. Kairos time is the moment you give a kiss. But you give it not because you looked at your watch, but because you felt it in your heart. And Paul knows, he is convinced what Kairos time it is. It is resurrection time. And when you know that, you have a hope that is real. You have a hope that is true. You have a hope that cannot ever be measured. You have a hope, a love that is forever. And when you know that, you know this. It is not world coming to an end time. It's world getting ready to be reborn time. It is not suffering is the end time. Its suffering cannot be compared to what's coming time. It is not death has the last word time. It is love has the last word time. It is not evil will win time. It is God has the victory time. It is not despair time. It is hope time. It is not fear time. It is faith time. It is not the night is the end time. It is the dawn is coming time. So leave the night behind. Embrace the dawn, because it's not death time. It's resurrection time. In resurrection time, you got hope that never ends. In resurrection time, you have a God working good even when you cannot see it. In resurrection time, you have a love that conquers everything. You have a hope that cannot ever be shaken. Because it is not Jesus is dead and gone time. It is Jesus is alive and on the move time. It is not despair and give up time. It is get up and embrace the dawn time. It is not fear has the last word time. It's Jesus has the last word time. And his word is resurrection. Because it's not despair time. It is hope time. It is not death time. What time is it? What time is it? What time is it? Just want to make sure. So leave the false hopes behind. The ones you can measure. They're good. They're just not ultimate. So let them go and embrace this hope. Embrace this dawn. If Jesus has risen, and Jesus has, then you will rise, and all of creation with you. The night is never the end of your story. It is never the end of any story. The dawn is. If you doubt it, wake up tomorrow and look outside. You'll see.